We're talking today with Henley Smith of Holland, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Trenton, New Jersey, February 1st, 1929.
All right. Now, did you grow up in Trenton or did you move around?
I grew up in Trenton. My father had served in World War I as a medical officer in France, and my mother was a school teacher.
Okay. So your father had served in World War I. What was he doing when you were growing up?
He had a very, very nice family practice in Trenton.
Okay. So you're growing up during the Depression years, but I mean, how did that affect you? Did your father have patients who couldn't pay their bills, or?
Yes, many. I can remember one birthday, I was into Lionel trains, and I wanted a certain building, and I don't remember how much it cost, but it was like $4 or something like that. And he said, I don't think I'm going to be able to have enough money to buy that for you. But it turned out he did. But so that was the first inkling I got of how tough things could be. But there was always food on our table.
Right.
We were able to, well, back in 1930, maybe it was 36 or 37, my parents bought a house on the New Jersey coast in Lavallette, New Jersey. But I remember him talking to a real estate agent about a house they really wanted, and the price was $10,000. And my father says, that is much too high. You better find me something different. So he found us something different.
Okay. Now, of course, and as we're kind of moving out of the Depression, World War II starts. Do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Well, there was a radio serial on called Don Winslow, U.S. Navy, and I used to listen to that every day. And he was stationed at Pearl Harbor, I think, for a while. So I was familiar with Pearl Harbor. And then when the attack came on December 7th, 1941, I happened to be playing with the neighborhood kids. And that's when I first heard of it.
All right. And now, of course, you're still a kid and in school at that point. You're too young to go into the war yourself. How closely did you follow the news of the war, or how did the war affect things?
Well, I have to say my mother died in June of 1937.
Okay.
While they were refurbishing the house they bought at the shore. And I did follow the news. I was interested in the Army. Fort Dix was nearby Trenton. And my father was doing draft physicals. He volunteered to do that.
Okay.
And so I was interested in seeing the various patches that the soldiers wore that were at Fort Dix. So I started saving the patches, and later on in the war, whole divisions would come through Fort Dix, and they'd be there for maybe a couple of weeks, and then they go overseas or move to someplace else. So I kind of enjoyed that. And they had Army-Navy stores in town where you could buy the patches. So I guess I followed World War II, not so much before the U.S. got into it, but my father was very interested in history, And so we discussed it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, when we got into it, why, he was very interested and upset with himself that he didn't stay in the reserve after World War
Mm-hmm.
One, because I remember saying, I'd be a colonel by now,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Okay. But of course, then the war ends in 45, and now you're getting kind of, you're in your high school years
Mhm.
at that point. When did you finish high school?
Well, when the war ended, I was a junior in high school.
Mhm.
But the war, even though my father wasn't in it, uh, did help him physically.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to take care of two kids, a son and a daughter that I can't say were the best of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to take care of his parents who were still living. His father didn't drive, so and he had a very good practice. He had moved on from general medicine, I'll call it, to becoming an internist. Internal medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But it weighed on him with everything he had to do. He had to take care of these kids. He had to go to the supermarket every week. He had to do
Mhm.
everything. And he died June 1st, 1945.
Wow.
The war in Europe had just pretty much
Yeah,
ended,
yeah.
and the war in Japan was going on at that time.
So,
But to get back to your
Yeah,
senior
yeah.
year, I was a so-so student in high school, I guess. Got some A's, B's,
Mhm.
C's, and I found myself, I was very, very close to my father, and that really hurt me when he died.
Mhm.
But I said, I'm going to go into my senior year and I'm going to be on the honor roll. Well, that didn't happen. But I found myself in a senior English class, which they would call here now AP English.
Mhm.
They called it SAT English because they were preparing everybody for the oncoming English SATs and the general SAT
Mhm.
exam. And I also found myself in what they call AP Chemistry.
Mhm.
My English teacher was probably one of the greatest teachers I ever had in my life. I was the dumbest kid in that class. I don't know how I ever even got in it, but I was in it. And pretty much the same for chemistry. I didn't do very well in chemistry. I got the first semester, I ended up with a D. And the policy at Trenton High was that if you were taking a course where you had to take the first and then the second semester, if you got a D, you had to drop the course.
Okay.
But my chemistry teacher, I guess, had some faith in me and let me take the second semester. But that was the only D I ever got in high school. I wasn't that happy with myself for getting that, but I just got so disinterested in the whole thing
Mhm.
that I didn't even really apply to colleges. All my friends were going to college. I had 8 of my friends in my English class went to Princeton.
Mhm.
A couple of them went to Harvard, and a couple of them went to Yale, and then other decent schools. And I just thought that I should try to maybe take another year of high school. In the meantime, some friends of my father's moved into our house to take care of these 2 young kids.
Okay. Was your sister younger than you?
Yes, she was about 3 years younger than me. And so with no help from anybody, I applied to a couple of private schools in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. and won the Lawrenceville School, which was where my father wanted me to go to high school. I don't know if I applied there or not, but I did inquire, and thought it'd be best if I take 2 years. Well, I couldn't take 2 years. I don't want to take 2 years of high school again. But I did apply to the Haverford School in outside of Philadelphia, and they took me, and I spent a year there improving my grades. And I applied to several colleges, one being Lafayette College in Eastern Pennsylvania, where I was accepted. And I enrolled there in fall of 1947.
Okay. Now, at this point in your life, were you giving any thought to going in the military, or?
No.
No.
My thought was to try to get some decent marks, and I was accepted into their pre-med program, and I was majoring in it, and if you could believe it, chemistry.
Okay.
And I was minoring in biology, but I started, the freshman chemistry courses. They had some required courses I had to take.
Right.
And then I got through my freshman year okay. I was on the track team, and back then they had freshman sports. Freshmen couldn't play varsity.
Right.
Right after that, several years after that, they changed it. But so I was on the freshman track team as a pole vaulter. I did okay. And then one day I was at track practice, and some kid came over and said, "The coach wants to see you." So they were having trials for a oncoming dual meet. And he said, "I want you to get in the 100 dash trials, 100-yard dash trials." All right. Well, it turned out I won the trials. It happened that a friend of mine from high school, who was a year ahead of me, told the coach, this kid was a former New Jersey state champion, quarter miler and half miler. And I could run as fast as him. I knew that because we used to play games where we play slips where we have to chase each other. But anyway, he was the guy that said I should go in these time trials, and I happened to win them. And that was probably the end of my pole vaulting days. Although we had 3 other pole vaulters on that squad that were much better than me.
Okay.
So I finished up my freshman year. I went in to the second semester, the second year, taking biology and taking the next step in chemistry, qualitative analysis, and I did all right in that. All right, I got a B. But I hated biology. I just hated every minute. And at Lafayette, heads of department were required to teach freshman courses. And this, of course, was introduction to biology, I guess you could call it. I hated that. I can't say that. I disliked that teacher. And he was an old, gray-haired man. He had his PhD from Yale, and I guess all his undergraduate and his master's were from Yale. I thought he was the worst teacher I ever had in my life. And he had taught at Lafayette 2 future Nobel Prize medals in medicine. But when I was through with that course after my sophomore year, I said, I'm not going to be a doctor. And I got that out of my mind. And I said, what do I do? well, maybe I'll teach chemistry in high school or something like that. So that was my thought. So my junior year was coming up, and I decided to take some education courses which were required to teach in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and probably every other state. But one day I was in my fraternity house and no one was around, and I just was walking down the hall and there was a light in one room, and I went in the room, and there was a fraternity brother of mine. He was a chemical engineer and he was a senior. And I said, what are you going to do when you graduate? He said, I'm going into chemical sales. I said, you're a chemical engineer and you're going into chemical sales? To me, that's unheard of. He said, the chemical companies want technically trained men in their sales forces. And he did end up with Union Carbide Corporation in their plastics division. So after that, I thought a lot about chemical sales. But I continued with my education courses, which I didn't like. I got not to like them. The first was like introduction to education. The second was educational psychology. And the third one I took after I dropped out, I didn't drop out of the course, was either methods or curriculum or something like that. But they were all the same. Every course that I took was the same. And I just didn't like it. So as electives, I like geography, so the geography at Lafayette was part of the geology department. So I signed up for, as electives, every geology course or geography course I could. And I really enjoyed that. But that fact that chemical sales need technically trained people never left my mind. So as I went on, through my junior year, I kept thinking about that. So I finished the education courses and decided I didn't want to do that. Because my senior year was coming up, and I was going to have to do student teaching and all that stuff. And Pennsylvania required you take a full year of Pennsylvania history, or U.S. history. I think it was U.S. history now that I think about it. And so I enrolled in that and finished up my my junior year with halfway decent grades. And in the meantime, I'd been working on the Jersey Shore as a lifeguard. And I remember walking to work with another lifeguard friend, and walking by a backyard of a house and hearing that the North Koreans had invaded South Korea. So I said, if this continues, I know I'm going to end up in the service. And now my friend was a year ahead of me, and he'd already graduated. And he had been accepted to Rutgers Law School, but I don't know why. He started out, he was a year ahead of me, he started out majoring in chemistry. His father was a dentist, and his brother was in dental school, and his father wanted him to be a doctor or a dentist. He didn't want to be either. So somewhere along the line, he changed his major to English, and I guess did pretty well in that. But he and I were talking, and he wanted to be in the Navy. So Lakehurst Naval Station was nearby. That's where they had the blimps and everything. So after work one night, we went over there, and we talked to some people, and we told them we want to be officers, He said, well, you have to go to the Naval Officer Recruiting offices in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as the season was over, we went up there. And the people that we talked to told my friend, you have to have a degree to get into this program.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have 2 years of college math.
Mm-hmm.
You look like you only have had 1 year.
Yeah.
So you're ineligible for this. And then he pointed to me, you're ineligible because you don't have a degree yet.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I have a suggestion. The Naval Officer Aviation program only requires 3 years of college. So I would suggest you try that. And he said, you go into flight training and then you graduate, you're an ensign in the Navy. And this guy's father was a retired naval dentist. I think he retired as a commander or something like that. From the reserve, he was on active duty at one point, but he was on it then. So my friend went in this, and I went back to school, and I thought, I'm not so keen on being an aviator. Maybe I'll go down to Willow Grove Naval Air Station, which was nearby, and see what I come up with. So I went down there. I took the physical, and I flunked the physical because of my blood pressure was too high. In the meantime, my friend had passed and was accepted into the program, but they were backed up, so he was delayed. So what happened, I went down there about 3 or 4 times to take the physical. The naval corpsmen were come on back and try it. And I always had my blood pressure was just slightly high. So one day I thought, I'm going to give a pint of blood at the hospital and then go down. And I did. I went down there, and this was probably in, I would say, late October or maybe early November. And I passed the physical.
Mm-hmm.
Except the guy did fake me out a little bit on the eye test where you look at the book and you pick out numbers and stuff. The last one he showed me, I didn't see any number there, but I made up one. And he said, well, you just flunked yourself out. No, I'm only kidding you. Like that. He said, now you have to take the written test. So he put me in a room. I took the test, and he checked it out, and he said, all right, now, you passed. You have to go up to headquarters, and we'll set up an appointment with Commander so-and-so for an interview. So I went up to headquarters, reported in, talked to this petty officer, and he said, son, I'm sorry, because of a backlog, this program is temporarily closed.
Oh.
So I said, what do I do? He said, we have a reserve squadron here, you can enlist in it. And I said, well, what if it gets called up and I'm doing my college work? He said, you go. So I said, well, let me think about it. So I went back to school, disappointed, and there was an Air Force crew recruiting kids at the school. So I went over there and talked to them a little bit. And the guy said, well, you don't have to sign up to fly. You could be a non-flying officer in the Air Force. He said, how about taking the test? And he said, if you pass, you'll be invited to McGuire Air Force Base, which was right out of Trenton, near Trenton, and for physicals and interviews and all that. So I didn't hear anything. Then finally, I guess it was early December, I guess, I got a letter to come down for a physical and interview and all that. In the meantime, I had looked into anything the Army might have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And I found about this program that you could sign up for, and you had to go through these various steps. And if you went through these steps, you were automatically sent to OCS. So I said, I'll sign up for that. In the meantime, I went down to McGuire Air Force Base and had my interview. And then I didn't hear anything. And then the Army told me, we want you to go to Fort J, which was Governor's Island, New York at that time. And you'll be there for 3 days, taking tests, physicals, interviews, this, that, and the other thing, listening to some lectures. So I went over there, and it was mobbed. And it turns out, I found out, I didn't know this, but in this program, if you flunked out somewhere along the way, you would go back to civilian life with your draft obligation required or finished.
Wow.
And no wonder there was 1 million people there. So anyway, I did all the tests, the interviews, and everything. And the last day, it was actually 2.5 days. I remember Monday after lunch, we we all went to this auditorium-like building, and there were a couple officers up on the stage, and they were thanking us for spending time there, and they said, it'll be 2 to 3 months before you hear anything. Well, I wasn't happy. It meant I could go back and finish my senior year maybe. But 2 weeks later, I got a telegram telling me I was accepted in the program and to report to Fort Dix for basic training. So,
Okay. And just to interrupt, did you also at some point consider the Marine Corps?
well, that was the first place I went. I'm sorry I skipped it. And the Marine Corps said to me when they found out I was going into my senior year in college that you made a big mistake. You should have gotten the platoon leaders course back when you were a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
You would have spent 6 weeks in the summer at, I think it was Quantico,
Mm-hmm.
for 2 summers. And then when you graduated, you'd be commissioned as second lieutenant. But he said, I don't think there's much I can do for you now. There's Marine OCS is not open at this time. And I remember saying it probably will coming down the pike. I don't know if it ever did, but that was my first choice.
Okay.
Marine Corps.
All right. So we can,
One of my good friends who ended up a Marine officer. I don't remember if he went to Korea or not, but he said, oh, he's always kidding me about being in the Army and not the Marines. But anyway.
all right. So when did you actually start your training then for the Army?
I went to Fort Dix, I think it was the middle of January.
January.
And I hung around there for a couple of days in some kind of a recruit barracks.
Mm-hmm.
And started to meet a lot of guys. And these guys that I was meeting and put on various details together, were all in my program. And one day I felt really sick. And we were assigned to a dispensary or infirmary, and our job was sharpening needles. And I was so sick, I caught the flu.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't do any of that work. So these guys said, lie down under this table. They were all sitting at tables. And the medics won't see you. Well, the medics did see me. And they got uptight with me, but then they said, go ahead. Well, after about a week or so, I felt all right. I did everything I was supposed to do. And then I got orders to what was it, I think it was the 47th Infantry Regiment, which was a training regiment, and the 9th Infantry Division was the training division there. And I was in, I think it was George Company, G Company. And so I went through basic training with them. And it's interesting to note that the barracks I was in, the first floor of that barracks were all guys that had orders to certain military programs, Army programs. There was a lot of them that were following the same path I was following, but there were other guys going into Army Security Agency or special groups in the Army, but had to go through basic first. So we got through the basic, which was 6 weeks, and then we went to advanced infantry training.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about what your basic training consisted of. How did you spend that 6 weeks?
Well, it was really learning about Army traditions and heritage. Every infantry weapon that was available, we played with and took up apart, put it back together. Going out on the ranges to fire these weapons. Marching in parades. We were pretty well restricted. And I think we were pretty much restricted for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Couldn't get off the post. I lived 15 miles away. Or grew up 15 miles away. And then we went to...
Well, how much emphasis was there on discipline?
I don't remember doing any push-ups or anything there.
So it's not like the Marine Corps boot camp stereotype where they're yelling at you all the time
Well,
and
there was
abusing
some
you.
of that, but I don't remember any of that much.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you're not doing a bunch of push-ups and things, or extra KP duty, or other stuff like that.
Well, we all had KP duty, or all had some duties.
Yeah.
I think I had KP duty a couple of times, but that was all.
But that was sort of routine rather than
You had to stay in
punishment.
guard duty.
Yeah.
I know I had one weekend I had to spend guard duty. I was off 4 hours, one every 2 hours. That was a big pain. But it wasn't physically taxing.
Okay. All right.
And you had to learn your general quarters, or general orders, I guess, general orders. And
Okay. All right. So then, did you do your AIT at Fort Dix, or did they send you somewhere else?
Fort Dix, I was there for Fort Dix for 14 months. And I finished the infantry training. I went to leadership school at Fort Dix.
Okay.
Now that was an 8-week job. 8 weeks. 5 of those 8 would be in the classroom or out working on problems. The last 3 weeks you were assigned as, I don't know what you want to call it, cadre, I guess you'd call it, with a training company. And you'd assist in their training. I do say the worst day I ever had in the Army was at Fort Dix. And as we finished up the active part of the leadership school, that week they were trying to not let us sleep at all. They were depriving us of sleep as much as they could. And that last Thursday, I think it was. Yes, I think it was a Thursday. we were doing during the day what we were supposed to be doing. And the word came down, there was an attack by enemy forces around Lakehurst, New Jersey, and Fort Dix and McGuire Air Force Base were all hooked together. So they said, get your equipment, full field pack and rifle, and we were going to meet them head on around Lakehurst. So off we went. This was after all we did all day. And it was about a 25-mile hike, they said. And all the time they were throwing tear gas at us. And it was a real humid day, summer day. And oh God, you get that stuff in your eyes, it's awful. But anyway, we met down and met the invading forces, and we were successful in repelling them. So we had to march back to where we were camped. And we were supposed to put up our pup tents and all that stuff. I said, I'm so tired, I'm just going up. And I threw myself down on the ground, and it was in poison ivy.
Oh.
So I started that, in a day or so, I guess, itching. But the next day was Friday. I don't remember whether we had some celebration or not, but we all signed to an infantry company at Fort Dix. And I did the 3 weeks, graduated from, and while I was there at Fort Dix, one day a sergeant looked me up and he said, we have your form for OCS. We want you to select a branch that you want to be in. And since I was majoring in chemistry and almost had that completed, I said, Chemical Corps 1, Artillery 2, Infantry 3. And so my original orders called for successful completion of the prerequisites. I would go to Fort Riley, Kansas to OCS. But in the meantime, branch OCSs were opening all over the place. So I was told that I was slated to go to Artillery OCS at Fort Sill, but they weren't completely ready to accept students. So you were being assigned to a battery of field artillery that's at Fort Dix and fires that mission where you attack a hill and the overhead artillery is going over your head. It's supposed to give you an idea what it's like, I guess, in real combat when you have artillery firing over you. So I was there, I don't know, maybe 5 weeks. And it was funny. All I had to do was fall out in the morning, retreat, and I never had to be back. So, they never gave me any job. So I would go down to the shore and work as a lifeguard. I couldn't go every day because sometimes they did have us doing some stuff. And I learned some little things about artillery that I didn't know about. And finally I got my orders to Fort Sill OCS program. And that was in, let's see, toward the end of September, if I recall.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a 22-week program. And we had time off for Christmas. So anyway, the total time was about 6 six and a half months. So off I went to Fort Sill, and
How did they get you to Fort Sill?
well, I took a plane to Oklahoma City
Okay,
and a bus to Lawton, Oklahoma,
all right.
and that's where the harassing started.
Okay.
And it, well, you know, the TAC officers that greeted us, we had a captain who was a World War II paratrooper, a very, very nice man, Captain Bashman, I remember him. He's from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had, God, was it Lieutenant Buchanan, who had served in Korea. He was first lieutenant, back from Korea. He was a Southern guy. And then we had, and I don't know why we had this guy, Lieutenant Eva. He had graduated from Virginia Military Academy and probably went through the basic officer course. And then he was assigned to attack officer for an OCS battery. But the non-coms were all Southern guys. And they're all career Army guys,
Yeah.
old-time Army guys. All of them had been in World War II. And they got after our butts, boy. They, every 2 minutes we were doing push-ups. Give me 5-0 push-ups, candidate. Sir, candidate Smith reporting for the completion of 5-0 push-ups. And of course, I remember one time, this one, Bill Neal, he's from New Hampshire, he did something and they got him out of ranks. Give me 5-0 sit-ups. And then Bill went to the sergeant. I remember he was a master sergeant. Candidate Neal reports the completion of 5-0 sit-ups. And I got, take a post, candidate. So Neal grabs his arm like this. I said, take a post, candidate. I am taking my pulse. I am taking my pulse. And that the whole squad or platoon order was got laughing, and we were all doing push-ups. But you know, in the first part of OCS, the first 3 weeks, we're learning about the motors the Army uses, the engines. So we were working with diesel engines, gasoline engines, probably any other engine they could find. And we'd have to march over each morning. First we'd have physical training in the morning, and then we'd march over to where we'd spend the day. And when we'd come back, we'd find beds, mattresses, pillows, clothes out in the, we'll call it the Battery Street, and we'd have a certain amount of time to get that back and get it in order. And that was a real pain. And plus, every place you went, you had to run. And if you saw an officer, if you were running, you saw an officer coming, you had to stop and salute. So that I got to a bunch of people. And by the end of, say, 3 weeks, we were down, I think we started about 130 in the class, and we were down, I don't know, maybe 20.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What happened to the other guys? Did they just go back into the ranks?
I guess if you were in one of that Army program, you'd go back to civilian life.
Oh, okay.
But the Army got smart. They changed the rules.
Mm-hmm.
If you did flunk out, you would go into the regular I don't know what regular army, but you go in the army.
Yeah.
So that went on pretty intense for, I'd say, the first 3 weeks. We weren't allowed off the post. We'd have inspection every Saturday morning, sometimes outside, but most of the time inside, so they could check, throw the quarter on the bed to see if it bounced, look how your foot locker was done and how your clothes were hung and all that stuff. It was pretty intense, and we were standing at attention the whole time they were inspecting your area. We all had little, oh God, we had two cots and a partition. I can't think of what they call that, but we're partitioned off to it at the time. And we'd get demerits, and if you got so many demerits, you had to, with full rifle and full field pack on Sunday afternoon, you had to go march up this mountain. It really wasn't a high mountain, but it was a hill and stuff. Fortunately, I never had to do that. At that time I thought, well, I'll just try to keep my nose clean and be quiet. Nobody will know I'm around. And I did get demerits, but I never got enough. If you got so many, you had to do it twice on Sunday.
Okay. Did things lighten up after the first 3 weeks, or change anyway?
They did change. Instead of having, say, 4 NCOs running around giving you hell, we only had maybe 2. And they were like permanent NCOs attached to our battery. And I was an item battery. It was the 10th class of the Fort Sill OCS for that year. The OCS had been opened before World War II started, but then closed down probably in the late 50s.
Or late 40s? So before Korea, and then had to reopen?
Oh, yeah, the 40s, I'm sorry. Yeah, and then reopened. And it was reopened in the early 50s. And then things eased up a little bit, but they were still giving us push-ups and stuff. But they weren't throwing all the crap out on the street. But anyway, after finishing the motors, and I'm not sure I knew any more about motors than I did before. But then we went into survey. We were taught how to survey and all this. I think that only lasted, I think maybe just 2 weeks or something like that. And then still we were losing guys. And we had, in my class, we had a lot of guys that were career Army enlisted. And they were older than most of us. And every Saturday inspection. And then it got to be, there would be competition. Parade competition. I think it was either every Saturday afternoon, and the batteries would compete against each other, and we'd pass and review and do all that stuff. And then we'd stand. Then we have our inspection in the morning. And then we were starting to be allowed to go off the post. And a bunch of us would go in to Lawton and have a couple beers and go back that night usually. And then I forget what else we did, but then we went into gunnery, which was a 8-week course. And I remember the first day of gunnery, we went down, we were in a classroom, and there was the guy who was teaching Henry was a major, and he was a very nice man, I'll tell you that. I can't remember his name. But he'd been in World War II and all that. He was an artillery officer in World War II. But the first day, we sat at our desks and we were given a math test. And fortunately, I had enough math to pass the test. And we were also given a map reading test. And I knew a little bit about reading a map,
Right.
a military map. So I know I passed those tests. Then that whole week, we did a math and map reading lessons in that. Come Friday, we were given the same tests, pretty much, different numbers and stuff. And if you flunked, you were out. Well, I didn't flunk, and so I stayed in. So we lost some of our people. And then we started learning all how to fire a mission and all that. And then eventually we were going out on the range. Oh God, that was, and we all were given little stools. We sit in the stools, and we had another teacher. He was a first lieutenant, and I don't remember his name. And he had been in World War II, and he was a very good teacher, just like the major. And anyway, we'd go out to service practice, and they would appoint you. They'd say, "Candidate Smith, your mission," and you take your little chair out and sit. Your whole class was there, sitting usually on bleachers or something. And he would say, "Do you see that? You see the blockhouse? There was Signal Mountain was right down the road. That was kind of a high mountain for that area, even though there were Wichita Mountains were there. They weren't on it was a state park, but they were far away. But this was a hill, and it had a blockhouse on it. He said, from the blockhouse, go left 10 meters, and you'll see what you think is a knocked out tank. That's your mission, to hit that tank or come near it." And so the guy would go through firing his mission, and I would pray I was never going to get called. But I did get called a bunch of times, and I guess I did all right.
So would they give you coordinates to set, or?
Sometimes, depending on what mission they wanted you to fire. Because, you'd go out there, you shoot an azimuth. I mean, they had all the numbers plugged in, and so the school troops that fired that mission must have fired a million times. But anyway, I guess I did all right. But then toward the end of the gunnery session, in the meantime, we have a classroom sessions where we learned how to work all the slip sticks that they had, and the deflection fan. And a lot of time we were on the guns too, working around them. But anyway, I didn't know this would be my last mission, but I got Candidate Smith. The guy gave me the instructions, and I remember going up there, and I was able to shoot an azimuth and give the coordinates, and I said fire for effect. Usually, what was the command? Fire. Will adjust. Fire.
Yeah.
Will adjust. But this time I said, I'm pretty sure I need this. Fire for effect. and they fired it. And whatever that target was, an old school bus or something, boy, it went in. You could see the fire and everything. And from the background, oh, I said target. That was
Okay.
the command I gave the guns. And I heard a voice in the back say, "That was no target. Fire that, fire those same numbers again." And it was some colonel or a lieutenant colonel who was kind of spying on us with a group of other guys. So they fired that mission again, and damn if it didn't go right into that bus. Oh God, I was so lucky. But anyway, maybe that was my last mission. I never got called on again, and we were really just finishing up with gunnery.
Okay. So how many of you were left at that point?
Well, I'm not sure, but I can tell you, and as we progressed, some kids that were in the class ahead of us, the Army thought they would be good officers, but they weren't doing that well, and so they pushed them back to our class.
Okay.
I think we had 8 guys come back, and I think when we graduated, we had about 70, plus those 8 guys. So actually, they were part of the 8 guys. So anyway, I think the last thing we did. Besides firing those service practices, we went out on a range a couple times with 105s, and we're firing direct fire at targets. And it was funny. One of the officers helping us was a guy I went to high school with. He was a second lieutenant, and Alfie. He actually, he wasn't in my class this senior year. He went to a prep school, but he lived by, and so he was one of the school officers. But we worked on, each of us would take a different job, and we'd do that. We did that a few times, I think. And then, kind of as a graduation ceremony, we went out in the field and we took various jobs, like in a light 105 battery called for 9 officers. 3 of them were forward observers, but you had the battery commander, the battery executive officer, 2 assistant execs, what's the guy, the ammunition guy runs the ammunition part of it. And then there was a recon survey officer. And so we all took different positions, and we ran through a combat situation.
Now, did all of your practicing, were you always using 105 millimeter howitzers, or did you have any other guns?
Well, we always did 105s, but we learned about the 155s and the 8 inches and all that. And but it was all emphasis was mostly 105s. And then the rest of the day, rest of the session. Oh, I have to tell you, we all the candidates were selected to various positions. Like we had a candidate battery commander, a candidate exec, candidate squad leaders, candidate platoon leaders, and once on the I was I had been a squad leader and successfully managed that job. And I was hoping that would be, I wouldn't get any more jobs. But I remember we went into town Sunday afternoon, had a couple beers, and then came back. And you go over to the orderly room, and on the bulletin board was orders and what you were going to be next week. And I found myself battery commander.
Oh,
Oh, God. I didn't sleep a wink that night. And to tell you what uniform you had to wear. So, in the morning, you'd hear the reveille and all that crap, and then you'd hear over the loudspeaker in your battery area. We had 2 barracks. Item battery 10 minutes. That means you had to fall out in 10 minutes. Item battery 5 minutes. And then you'd fall out, and you had to fall out. Of course, I had to go be in front of the battery. And they're giving me a hard time about it. Everybody looked right, the right in uniform, everything.
we need to pause right now because this tape is about up, so we're going to pause. All right, now in your story, we had gotten to the point where you had been named battery commander with your training unit,
Right.
and the men had all come out and they're all properly in their uniforms, and then what happens from there?
This one guy falls out, standing in the ranks with a old army overcoat. Everybody was in field jackets, ready to go. And every TAC officer, including the regular battery commander, were on my butt. Oh, God. And of course, he was excused to go in and get his right uniform. Now, I will say this, and I don't mean to be mean or anything, but we only had 3 black guys in our class, and this was one of them, and nobody liked him. And he was from Dallas, Texas, and he was a high school teacher, but he just irritated everybody for one reason or another. The other guys, the other 2 were neat guys and just.
Now, where they did the sergeants, you said they were all Southerners pretty much. Did they harass the black men, or did they treat everyone pretty much the same?
About the same.
Okay.
And so anyway, the week went by. I would take some individual harassment, but things were easing up. The last bit of real harassment that I remember is when we were marching back to the barracks from where we had a classroom session. They made us duck waddle. And this was we all carried, during gun week, we carried a big bag and it had all our maps and equipment and all that stuff in it. And we called it the douche bag, and duck waddling. And come facing us was a group of young second lieutenants who were in the basic officer course, and they were marching in proper order and everything, and we were grunting and duck walking, and I could imagine those guys saying, "Oh, thank God we're not in that." But that I don't remember much after that.
All right. Now, was that sort of the end of
It was
your
toward the
OCS?
end of the gunnery sessions.
Yeah. Okay.
And by the way, once you got within 4 weeks of graduation, you became a red bird, and you wore a little red thing on your epaulette on both sides. and you were allowed to harass the new coming guys. So,
So you weren't quite an officer yet,
Right.
but you were now on a level above the rest of them.
right.
Okay, all right. And so then at the end of all of this now, do you get your commission?
Yeah, well, we had some more stuff to do. We had to go through 3 weeks of combined arms
Okay.
where they brought in the infantry and armor and all that and showed us how they worked together and how the Air Force would work and the Navy with their big guns bombing and all that and tactics and all that. And we also were given lessons in proper decorum, how Henley Post would set tables and all that.
Okay.
And maybe we were given some proper English lessons, I don't know. But by that time, it wasn't bad.
Okay. Did you get training for doing forward observer work? Or were you mostly just with the guns?
Well, that's when you had service practice, when we direct fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that was part of it.
That was part of the gun reading. So, and one thing I forgot to say, when I was a battery commander, in the Friday afternoon parade, my battery won top battery.
Mm.
And that was the first time our battery won it during the 16 weeks we'd been there or something like that. And then the following thing, there was another guy in the class, Jack Lambert, who was from Trenton, New Jersey, too. We went to different high schools together, but I did know him, but not very well. And he was a battery commander the next week, and he won it. So we won it twice with two guys from Trenton.
There you go.
And I think really, Jack and I had, I think, pretty much the same kind of personality. I've never been known as a loudmouth or this, that, or the other thing. And I think I'm probably more of an introvert than an extrovert. And I think he's pretty much the same. And I've always thought that the powers that be recognized this and really wanted to test us and see if we could handle the men and do what we had to do.
Mm-hmm.
So whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know, but I think that's what happened.
Okay. All right.
And then we eventually graduated, and we were commissioned second lieutenants, and everybody got orders to an artillery unit in the United States. The guy that graduated top of our class, I don't remember what his first name was, and I never knew him too well. He was in the other barracks. He was offered a regular Army commission.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Princeton graduate, very smart, and I don't know if he took it or not. But
So the rest of you have reserve officer commissions? Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
All right. And what unit do you get assigned to?
well, I was assigned. I figure well, actually, I'll tell you this. I did put my application to go into airborne, because at that time I was thinking, this might be a good career for me, just staying in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, if you want to be a career Army guy, you better get those parachute wings.
Mm-hmm.
So I did put my application in for airborne, but after giving it some serious thought, I decided, forget it. I regret that today. But anyway, I went up and got the application off the first sergeant's desk and tore it up. So I got assigned, all those guys going airborne were assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Right.
And some of my good friends, one of my friends, last name Arnold, his father was a Major General in the U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm.
His brother played on those great Army football teams of the 1940s, and he was probably a general too. But Arnold's father was very friendly with the commanding officer at Fort Sill. But he applied for airborne but was physically rejected. So he got assigned to the 18th Corps at Fort Bragg with the feeling that he'd eventually be able to get into the airborne.
Right, because the 18th Corps is the Airborne Corps, and that's
Right.
where the 82nd Airborne is.
Yeah. So anyway, I got assigned to the 195th Field Artillery at Fort Lewis, Washington. I knew they were going to send me as far as they could from my hometown without sending me out of the States. But anyway, so I went out there and I was assigned to the 55th Field Artillery Group. They had three battalions, the 7th 20, which was a 105 outfit, and two 155 outfits. I was assigned to the 7th 20 for a day and a half, and they broke it up and sent. I guess they didn't have too many soldiers anyways. They sent everybody to the 1-5 outfits. So I was sent to C Battery, 195th Field Artillery. And the 195th Field Artillery was a Kansas National Guard unit that had been called up during the Korean War. And as I understand it, and I have never read this or proved it, they had been ordered to Panama, but they flunked their battalion tests. So they were back at Fort Lewis, training to take their battalion tests over again. So C Battery, the commander was a first lieutenant. His last name was Little, a big tall guy. He had been back from Korea for a couple of months. He was with the 1st Cavalry Division over there. And I thought he was a pretty good guy, but kind of aloof. And at that time, I don't even remember who the executive was. I remember there were 2 master sergeants, 3 master sergeants. There were 2 first sergeants. These were fairly old men.
Yeah.
World War II guys, Korea guys. We didn't need 2 first sergeants. But anyway, when I got there, Lieutenant Little, okay, here are your duties. You're the motor officer. You're the mess officer. Every lousy duty because we only had me. I don't remember anybody else.
So there are no other officers except the 2 of you.
Right. And then we got a first lieutenant who was in the 7th Division in Korea, came in. He was there on just biding his time till he was discharged.
Right.
So Lieutenant Little didn't do anything with him. But anyway, I did my job as motor officer and mess officer. Now, the commanding general at Fort Lewis, General Burns, said that officers could not eat in the enlisted men's mess hall. I was mess officer. I ought to at least try the food every once in a while. And the mess sergeant was from the old National Guard outfit in Kansas. And the next in command, next sergeant, he was from the old National Guard outfit. And I got along pretty well with them. And we had a top mess. I think we were in the 3rd Corps. We were really 6th Army Artillery, that's what we had. But in the 3rd Corps. And we won some competition between mess halls at different posts. And I did eat there every once in a while. But the officers' club we were out in the boonies. The officers' club was a long drive, and we weren't allowed to drive any military vehicles. We had to drive our car. Well, I didn't have a car there, but it seems the mess sergeant was selling used cars. So he said, I got a 1935 Plymouth Coupe. I said, well, how much you need for that? He said, $500. So I bought that car, and it was my car for while I was out there. And later later I became executive officer as a second lieutenant, and this guy who came back was a first lieutenant. He didn't like that much. But, you know, in the artillery, the executive officer really was in charge of the firing battery. It wasn't like maybe if you're an infantry, you have paperwork and stuff. I had no paperwork. And when I was a motor officer, it was a tractor drawn 155 outfit. And I never drove, you know, a tractor vehicle, so I would drive them around the yard there where we stored all our vehicles. So I enjoyed doing that. And I had good guys. Most of them were back from Korea. And then as time went by, we got an ROTC guy from the University of California. His wife was more trouble than him. One day after I had my car, I just hung around, and I was sitting in the orderly room with the first sergeant and a couple other guys. And it was after supper, after we ate. I ate there that night, and the phone rings, and this guy's wife calling. He was doing something. He was on duty someplace. Calling to talk to him. So the guy said, we'll send somebody and find him. In the meantime, we just continued talking, and sometimes the talk wasn't proper. The lieutenant comes in and he picks up the phone. Yes, my dear, yes. All right, I'll take care of it. And then she talks about what she told me. She heard the worst language she ever heard in her life. And so the next day, I grabbed the battery commander and I said, hey, look, we're sitting around the orderly room, and Mrs. whatever her name was called, and we had to go find Lieutenant so-and-so, and there was probably some bad words used. So I wanted you to know that if Lieutenant complains to you. He said, okay, thanks. I hated to be a tattletale, but I didn't want any of these sergeants to get in trouble or anything. Not that they would. I don't think anything ever came of it. But while I was there, I did pull duty as a stockade guard, captain of the stockade guard for a weekend.
And so that's the jail on the base.
The jail.
Yeah.
The guardhouse, whatever they call it. And so I had to supply the men, and we formed the guard, and we would man the little guard posts and all that. And I would have to be there. And while I was there, I think it was a major came by and told me he found some of our guards in the tower asleep. And she my butt for that. And also while I was there, the commander of the MP company, a first lieutenant, came by, and we got talking, and we found he was from California. He went to San Jose State, and he was in the same fraternity at San Jose State that I was in. at Lafayette, and so I don't know, we got kind of friendly. And he said, "Where you living?" I said, "They got us in the Fort Lewis Inn, which is an old fire trap, and they turned it into a third floor something into the BOQ. So that's where I'm
The
living."
bachelor officer quarters.
Right.
Yeah.
And I said, "Where do you live?" He says, "I live in the bachelor officer quarters. It's a beautiful brick building with a nice lawn there." Fort Lewis was a really pretty post. And he said, "Look, my roommate is leaving me, and I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can get you in there." Well, fortunately, he was able to do that. So he and I roomed together and got to be really good friends. But anyway, as time went by, I was also, when I was at the guard, I had to bed check at night, and I'd walk in with my 45 and all this. No bullets or anything in it, and make sure, do the count. And I thought that was funny. But the funniest one was I was Class A officer, which is the paymaster, and I had to go to, oh God, my eyes are itching. I had to go to, I forget what they called it, where you pick up the money. And I went on a Jeep with a 50 caliber machine gun and guys with carbines over their shoulders. So, and the funny thing about it, we weren't armed at all. We just had those. So I thought that was crazy. But then I had to dish out the pay. And then one time I got selected to take the inventory at the Fort Lewis Golf Club. And I was told to be there Sunday night and go over everything. Well, I got there Sunday evening. It was still light. I go in, and there's a sergeant in there. He says, "Don't worry, Lieutenant, we took care of it, just sign this." So back I went. And that was the first time that I drove a Jeep on the post. It was really upsetting I couldn't drive a military vehicle, but I did for that time. And I just think, there's a couple other funny incidents there. I'll think of them later, maybe. But I was there for about 5 months, and I think the whole time I was there, we only had service practice once. Oh, I was also on a assistant trial counsel and a court martial. I was held Saturday morning, and I knew the kid. He was in my battery. He was just a jerk, wise guy jerk. And apparently it was, the types of court martials, this was the lowest one for subordinates. And he was found guilty and had to go to the stockade for maybe 30 days or worse. And we had to stay in his barracks. I forget what the sentence was. But it was through around noontime. And as soon as that happened, everybody ran away. They left. There was I ended up having the orders drawn up and signing it. The trial counsel was supposed to do all that. So the guy was under guard, so they took him off. But that was a nutty time. And then in August, the general said, "We're going to do an infantry project all month. You artillery guys, you're now infantry." And we had infantry. Went in the field. They let us off weekends, but we were in the field for that whole month. And we had problems. We had war games and all this stuff. And I do remember I was in charge of a group, and we were supposed to go through this area and then circle around and set up some kind of fire support system.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were going through there was a wooded area. You could walk through it. It wasn't that bad. There was not a lot of ground cover. And I was feeling that I knew we were in the right direction, but we should have been coming to an area that dropped off into a valley. So I said to the sergeant, I'm going to climb this tree and see what I can see. Well, I didn't realize we were like a step from the edge. And I got up at the tree, and I looked out. I could see Mount Rainier, snow-capped, beautiful. I looked to the north. There was Mount Baker and Mount Adams, snow-capped and beautiful. And then south there was Mount St. Helens, or the one that exploded, and another mountain and I didn't want to come down from up there. It was so pretty. So I did, but we did go down, went down into this valley and cut around, and there was a wide open space, and there was so-called enemy troops on the other side. We could see them, about as large a group as we had, which was probably 2 squads.
Mm-hmm.
So I set up a fire base, and then I had one machine gun. I set that up, and I set a couple. I guess I had a BAR too. I set that BAR up so I could get some crossfire as they approached us. And then I put skirmishers around in here, and they come, and they had a referee with them, and the referee declares that my group was all wiped out.
Oh.
I couldn't believe it. And neither could the non-coms I had. So I went back, when we went back to where we were camping, I complained to an officer about that and set up the way we were. And he said, oh, you guys got screwed too bad.
Mm-hmm.
But that was another kind of, I was annoyed at that. But I enjoyed being at Fort Lewis. The only thing I didn't like, we had a warrant officer, chief warrant officer, who hated new second lieutenants. That's why I got a lot of those duties.
Mm-hmm.
And the 6th Army was having an inspection, and we had to we all were assigned courses to take. And I was assigned a fire direction course. So I had a bunch of guys. We had an open area, and I had a little podium, and there were little grandstand or bleachers there. And while I was teaching the course, I was asking questions of some of the people that were taking the little course or in the course. And just then, a group of officers from, I think it was 3rd Corps or something, came by. And I was asking questions, and there were a couple of guys who were in the artillery in Korea, and they were answering them. And I, how does this work, or what did you have to do? And they knew all the answers. And then they left. And it was, this was a 2-hour course. So we were going to take a 10-minute break, and we were right near the mess hall. So this major, the battalion exec comes by. We had about, I'll say, 5 or 6 minutes to go. And the major said, take your break now and go in to the mess hall. Guys use the bathroom and all that. So we did that. And we came out and sat down. And 2 minutes later, this colonel, my battalion commander, who was one of the toughest guys I ever met in my life. I started to teach, and he comes right up to that podium and chews the ass off me. You took your troops in too early. And I checked and they weren't here when they were supposed to be. And I'll tell you, I wet my pants. I physically wet my pants. Because one thing I learned in OCS, don't holler or degrade a subordinate in front of their men. Boy, I was being degraded. And it really shook me up. And he left, and I half-assed went on and finished the course, and I went back, and I was sitting in the orderly room, and a guy comes in and says, Colonel wants to see you right away. I thought, oh, Jesus. So I reported to the colonel. He said, what the hell were you doing? I said, well, I told him, the major told me to take, we were close to the break time, so the major said, go inside. So I took him inside. He said, that's when I came by and you weren't there, you're supposed to be there. But I said, I want to tell you that the inspecting officers thought the class you were teaching was the best one they had seen all day. Thank you very much.
Lovely.
So, we weren't buddies, but at least he knew who I was after that. And then I got my orders for Korea.
So when did that happen?
That happened in August sometime.
51?
Yeah, August. Let's see.
Or 52?
52.
52 now, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right, because you've been training and on duty now for a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got.
Did you get to go home first, or?
Yeah, I took a 30-day leave. And my mission when I went home was to date not every girl I knew, but some of the girls I knew. And I had this, I had been partially going with one of my sister's good friends, but she wasn't the one. So I had this girlfriend, not a girlfriend, a friend that went to the, she was 2 years behind me in high school, but she went to a different high school. But I knew her, but I'd never dated her or anything. So I called her one night and I said, geez, how about going to the movies or something? And the big deal back, if you lived in Trenton, Princeton was 12 miles away. You take your date to the movies at Princeton. So I said, well, we'll go up to Princeton to the movies. And then we'll have a couple beers afterwards. And that was fine with her. She was a secretary at Radio Corporation of America, RCA, but wasn't the Reformed Church.
Mm-hmm.
She was a patent secretary. My eyes itch. And we went, had a very nice date, and we went to this one place and had a couple beers before I took her home. And I had the worst allergy attack of my life. My nose was running, my eyes were itching. And I told her, I said, I enjoyed myself tonight. Would you go out again with me? And she said, yes. So so to make a long story short, we had 6 or 7 dates in the month I was home. And I do remember I wore my uniform on one date to pick her up and try to impress her parents a little bit. And we went out to dinner before. We were going to a show, and I spilled gravy all over my uniform. But anyway, to make a long story short, I think by the end of those 6 or 7 dates, we pretty much knew that we loved each other. So I was headed for Camp Stone, California, port of embarkation, I guess. I was there about 4 days, getting shots and filling out forms and all that stuff. And then they said report to Travis Air Force Base, which I did. They put me on a plane and flew me to Tokyo with stops at Honolulu and Wake Island to refuel.
Mm-hmm.
In Honolulu, let's say that this was a DC-4, DC-6, 3 seats across, I think, if I remember. But there was only about 25 or 30 of us on that plane. And so I had 3 seats to myself. And we were told we'd have a 5-hour wait in Honolulu. And a lot of the guys wanted to go downtown, but I said, I'm just going to hang around the airport. I needed a haircut. And there was a female and a male cutting hair at their barbershop. I never had my hair cut by a girl, so I waited for her just to have a girl cut my hair, which she did. It was all right. I normally don't like to have girls cut my hair. But anyway, we made it to Tokyo, got in there. It was late. It was probably about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Then we were bussed over to Camp Drake. And it was around 2 o'clock in the morning, and they take a bunk out there or something. And so I go to get into bed and get going. And when I wake up the next morning, I knew half the guys in the room, but they had been there a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, oh, we got some great places. Tonight we want you to go with us and all this. And so I had things I had to do, certain planned military operations like filling out forms and that type of stuff. But anyway, we did go out, a bunch of us that night. We had a great time. And then the next morning, I got my orders for Korea for that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so they gave me a M2 carbine, which was all loaded with that cosmoline and crap that you had to clean up. So it took me a couple of hours to get that thing in working order. And then I hopped a train for Yokohama with a few other guys, and I got on a boat. I can't remember the name of it, but it was one of those military transport boats, like the General Nash or something like that. And we took off out of Yokohama, and when I had eaten a couple times and slept, we landed in Busan and got off, and we were put on this rickety old train car with the hard seats. I think the whole, there were only officers in that one car. And we were told that we were headed for Yangnam-po, which is right near Seoul, or in China, I guess. And we would have to stand guard duty for 2 hours because there were guerrillas around, and it was cold. It was, even though it was like the second week of October, it was cold. So we did that and froze to death, and froze to death in the car too. That's what needed. And we got into Yangtang-po, and then they transferred us over to a repo depot in Incheon. And we stayed there a day or two, a couple days. And I got my orders for the 7th Infantry Division, and took the train out to Chorwan, I think it was, the town. It's part of the Iron Triangle, they called it. Chorwan, Kumwa, and some other town, I don't remember. But we were there about, I would say, maybe 2 days. And myself and another guy, John Little his name was, got orders to 7th Division Artillery headquarters. So we went down, took a truck over to there. We were in the back of the truck, and it was one of those 2.5-ton trucks. And we got in the 7th Division Artillery headquarters, and we were welcomed, and we were there, and then we both got orders for the 57th Field Artillery. And so the next day, off in another truck, we went over there to headquarters, and we met the battalion commander, and both of us were assigned to A Battery, 57th Field Artillery.
Okay. Now, before you continue, at this point now, you've seen a little bit of Korea. You landed at Busan, and then
Right.
you took your train, and when you went to Incheon, then back over to the area you were stationed. What sort of impression did the country make on you? What did you see or observe?
Well, the first thing, when we left Busan, it was daylight. And I never saw poverty like I saw it in my life. I never realized things could be so bad, and the shacks, and you know. But then the rest of the time it was night, and when I went over from the Yangnam-po to Incheon, I don't remember even looking at anything or remembering anything. I do remember getting into the replacement depot, being assigned a bunk, and I don't think I left that bunk the whole time I was there. I had some stuff to read, and I was putting around with that. And then when it was time to leave, they just took us to a railroad station, and we got on the train to go out to Central Korea someplace, which was Chorwan, Kumwa, and that area. But that was just regular country with hills and dales and trees. I don't remember seeing a lot of people.
Right. Okay. All right. So now you've made it. You've joined your battery.
Right.
And then what happens
Well,
from there?
It was kind of late in the afternoon, I'll say maybe 4 o'clock. And the 7th Division was involved in battle at that point at Triangle Hill, which was a major battle for them. And I remember coming in and reporting to the battery command, along with John Little. And I remember he said, "Sit down at this table." It was a bunker they were in, but it was a pretty nice bunker, I guess you could say. And I remember I had to go to the bathroom, so they had some porta potties out there. So I went on, I looked down. We were up pretty high, and I looked down in the valley there. I could see our guns here. Ooh, shouldn't have called it a gun. And the 4.2 howitzers in back of us. So I thought, holy Christ, what's going on here? So anyway, I came back, and the battery commander had been talking to John, like interviewing him. And then he started asking me questions, where you're from? Trenton, New Jersey. Oh, Trenton, New Jersey. Did you know a guy by the name of Russ Foss? I said, yes. Russ Foss lived a couple blocks from me. And it turns out that the battery commander was a graduate of the University of Missouri, and Russ Foss was a graduate of the University of Missouri. and they were in the same fraternity at Missouri, was it Columbia, Missouri, or
Yep.
someplace?
Yep.
And they were in the same fraternity as I was. And so, right then and there, we were talking all about things in common. And that continued till after it got dark. And poor John Little here didn't get a word in edgewise. He was an ROTC officer from Harvard. And as we continued to talk, the phone rings. It's for the battery commander. And the message was, they need one FO real quick, like over someplace. John, go. Well, John went, and he never came back. He was killed that night.
Wow.
So I was so lucky. And anyway, the next day I was assigned to Baker Company, 31st Infantry. And they were in the Triangle Hill was coming to an end. And, Baker Company was assigned to a blocking position north on the road to Yangdangpo. And if my memory serves me, we were right on the line with the 3rd Division west of us. And I was to relieve the FO who was up there. And so he stayed with me a couple of days, and he went to his new job. And we were there. I know the 3rd Division, they had some kind of a fight. And I could watch the whole fight. And it looked like we were getting killed. But anyway, we didn't have much action there. And the 7th Division Infantry was relieved, and that they went offline, but the artillery always didn't go off anywhere.
Oh.
But our artillery, I don't know where they went, but I got assigned to a ROC outfit.
Which means a Korean outfit.
Yeah, Republic of Korea. I don't remember that it was a regiment, and I was assigned to an infantry battalion, and there was a major who was the advisor to the lieutenant colonel was. So my crew just went over there, and we had these, I call them Yukon tents, and we had a little fire that heated the tent really well. So we just parked our tent there and worked out of there, and I talked to the major, and I didn't like him. But that was too bad. So I just, most of the time I was in the Korean headquarters. I couldn't understand any of them, and they couldn't understand any of me. But apparently that night, they had planned a little raid on some Chinese positions. And I was over there during that raid, and it turned out we had searchlights that would light up areas of approach. And these Korean soldiers were in the searchlight. And that colonel, I remember a little squatty guy, came over and grabbed me. Get those searchlights turned off. Get those searchlights turned off. I didn't know how to do that. So I called my battalion and told them, and I don't know if they ever did anything. The searchlights were run by the 1st Field Artillery Observation Battalion. And I don't know if they were in contact with them or not. But the searchlights never got turned off. And I kept getting hell. Where's the major to help me? Boy, that guy, that Korean colonel, he'd give me the evil eye, stare me down. And so we were there about 2 days, and we were told to move on and given another place. And it turns out we go to a place. We weren't doing any forward reserve things. So we went to, it was a bunker at the foot of a hill, not a very big hill. So I had a 4-guy crew, including me. And I had a driver, chief, a sergeant recon guy, and a radio operator. So we drove over there, and there was a little bunker, had 4 bunks in it. And we went in there, and I said, let's go climb up the top of the hill and see what's up there and where we are. And we went up the hill, and we saw these 3 or 4 guys coming towards us. We didn't know what they were at first, but then we knew they weren't Chinese. And they came by, and they were Australian soldiers. They were kind of surveying the area just like we were. So anyway, it was chilly. And so we went back to the bunker, and we ran out of fuel. You could use diesel fuel, preferred, but you could use gasoline. And we had set the little reservoir up above the stove in the cabin, or bunker. And so the radio operator got a gas can and went up and filled it up. It's dark by this time. So he comes back. We're all in our bunks. And he lights the fire. And he sets himself on fire because he had spilled gasoline all over him. And I was in the bottom bunk. Get the hell out of here, get the hell out of here. So he ran out, I ran after him, down a little hill. I caught him, and we got the fire out. And immediately I said to the driver, get him back to the medics, because he was badly burned. So the driver did that to 7th Medical Battalion, or whatever they call themselves. And he came back, and I said, well, how's the guy doing? And I couldn't remember his name, sorry. He said, he's pretty badly burned. I said, okay, so the next morning was Sunday. So I said, let's go back and to the 7th Division medics and see what's going on. And we went back there, and he was gone. We said, what happened to him? Oh, we just sent him back. We gave him some salve and sent him back to the battery. So I said, well, let's go to the battery. And when I got there, he was on his bunk, but salve and some bandages around him. And I looked at him, and I said, what the hell is going on? Can you move all right? Come out, get in this Jeep. We're going right back to 7th Division medics. And we did. And they, I think, took a serious look at him. And he eventually was evacuated to Japan. So that was a lousy deal. And then let's see, then that was a lot, that was part of the end of October and November. And then we got sent up, I don't know, I don't remember. There was a company of 7th Division Infantry I think it was Baker Company again. It was up on the hill with a new captain and the commanding officer who was a World War II guy. And my driver, we called him Dink, or my recon sergeant rather, Dink. He called this guy Sumpole 6 or something, because he had been with him on and off. And so all new officers in the 7th Artillery had to take a test. So it was my turn to take a test. So I went back to the battery, and we had to do the cannoneer's hop, which is to the right of the piece falling and to the left of the piece falling, jumping around them. And then a little written test. And then it was, I don't remember. Oh, I remember. In that one job with that, when I went back, there was some, we were right in front of Papasan, that big hill there, and I could see Chinese trucks, the lights of Chinese trucks coming in. And of course, I talked to our fire direction center, and they said, they're out of our range. And I said, well, can we get some airplanes in there to bomb? And they said, the hills are too high or some crap. And we were there for a while. And I remember that this guy, Dink, the sergeant, his first floor reserver was badly wounded. And this guy, I don't know, he was so brave, it was something. But anyway, the 7th Division was slated to go online around Christmas time. And we, just trying to think, we had actually four forward observers because we had the 7th Division had the Columbia Battalion attached to us, and we had to have a Spanish-speaking observer. And this is another funny story. The Spanish-speaking observer was named Guy Newland. Guy Newland had graduated from Princeton in the ROTC program there, and he was the boyfriend of one of my sister's girlfriends. And he was born in, his parents were Americans, but they were, I think they were born in Panama, and he was raised in Panama. So he knew Spanish fluently. And so we ended up getting together and talking and having our pictures taken together. And they brought him off the hill and made him my company commander for about 4 days. And then he rotated. And, well, no, he didn't. Not then. He got assigned to battalion headquarters, and I don't remember what it was. And anyway, time went by, and we went into this new place. And Dink, my sergeant, says to me, he was going to go home in a few days. Let's take a look out front. So you could almost reach out and touch the Chinese lines at that point. So I said, we walked down into this valley, I thought too far. I could look up and I could see our bunkers and trenches and all that stuff. And I could see our OP. And it looked to me just like an OP, which I thought was very dumb. But anyway, we walked back.
As an observation post?
Yeah. We walked back, and the mortars had a forward observer, so enlisted forward observer. And I was the only officer forward observer, so all the other forward observers kind of congregated around me. And we all ended up in that observation post, because there was bunks in there. So the next day, I forgot to tell you, when we went in there, we replaced soldiers in the French battalion that had been, they were attached to the 2nd Division. And that first night, we ate with the officers, because we went up early. We went up there Christmas Eve. And so it was a little Christmas dinner. We ate with their officers who were leaving the next day. And I remember they had been in Vietnam, and they had Vietnam type food. And oh God, it was burned my system to death. But anyway, the next day I got orders to report to Division Artillery Headquarters. Apparently, all the group that I was in that took the test flunked it.
Okay.
I don't know what, but we did. So we had to take the test, and then we had to have it corrected or checked after we finished. I took the test. I passed. I couldn't believe I apparently flunked that test. But anyway, so we headed back, and we had to climb up, like a hatchback type climb up the hill. And while we were going up, Chinese mortars started to fall, and we were pushed ourselves up against the wall as we could, and they were falling down below us. But I was concerned one might hit nearby, or luckily hit. But anyway, they stopped, and we made it to our observation post, which had been blown up. And apparently, one of those observers the day before thought he saw a Chinese guy, or a couple of them, with what looked like a bazooka or a recoilless rifle. But anyway, everybody who was in that bunker was wounded, and they were all evacuated.
So it was good that you flunked that test.
Yeah. So that was another lucky time for me. So we stayed in that position for a while. And then we moved over more toward the east, or I think, or maybe toward the west. And we were in front of a hill called T-Bone Hill.
Okay. So we need to stop here.